Hey, Christina,
Hi.
how's it going?
Okay.
Let's see, we're getting some people here.
Okay.
I'm not seeing. Okay, here we go. Yeah, folks are signing on now. Um, how you doing?
I'm doing well.
Great.
Yeah, doing pretty good.
I'm gonna introduce you and then give you the floor. And you do know how to share the screen, right? Or are you just gonna talk?
I'm gonna share the screen. I practiced it once before
But let
and it should work.
Okay, great. Let me introduce you, and then we go right into it.
Okay. If I have any questions, do I just ask you or other Michael for
You can
like
ask me.
technical assistance? Okay.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Michael Ray Charles. I'm the Hugh Roy and Lily Kranz Cullen Distinguished Professor of Painting here at University of Houston School of Art. It is my pleasure to be here today with a dear friend and fellow artist whom I have admired for some time, Christina Coleman. But before I introduce her, Christina, I just want to say that we will have a period for questions. So please formulate questions and put them into the chat room as well as the Q&A section. Um, I've known Christina for some time, in fact, as a graduate student at the University of Houston, and it was a pleasure to work with her as an advisor on her graduate committee. I saw her work developed a lot. I was floored when I first saw some paintings, I think, that were done while she was in China. But over her time at the university, we grew to become what I think are close friends. I do hope Christina feels the same way. In fact, I consider her like family. Um, so she's been practicing artist for some time now after graduating from UT, and I think it's 2012 if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always surprised to hear that. First of all, she did her undergraduate at the University of California in Los Angeles. Her work takes takes a range of forms, including sculpture, drawings, and installations. And she uses a variety of materials, including commercial hair products and methods associated with traditional fine arts. The intersection subjects of her work are body, space, identity, and abstraction. She was an artist in residence at the Contemporary Art Center in Woodside in New York, and she shared curatorial responsibilities at the stijl PODIUM for Art Gallery in Austin. Her work has been exhibited in exhibitions, both solo and group, including I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings in Georgetown. No, that's sorry, at the George Washington Carver Museum and Culture Center, First Horizon of Juno at the Mass Gallery in Austin, and Spatial Continuum in Black at Texas A&M International University in Laredo, Texas. Please help me in welcoming Christina Coleman.
Thank you very much, Michael Ray, for that introduction. I really appreciate it. Hello, everyone. It's really good to be here. In fact, it is an honor to be here to speak today. I want to thank Michael Ray. I want to thank Aaron and everyone in the department for inviting me. Thank you very much. I hope everyone out there in the virtual audience is doing well during this time, or as best as can be. And yeah, so I first must ask that everyone please bear with me. technology is not my forte. So if there are any mishaps with technology in Zoom, I ask for your patience, but hopefully things will run smoothly. So today I wanted to focus on a few different bodies of work that I feel represent my practice as a whole. And so I will go ahead and just jump right in. Let me share my screen here. Okay. Okay.
Christina,
Mm-hmm.
we're looking at all of your slides.
Okay.
You might want to share the other. There should be 2 possibilities for selection.
Okay.
There we go.
Is that was right working? Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so this is an image of a work I did in 2012, and it's called 2 Lines. And this image was made using hair gel. And so all of the work in this first series that I'm going to show was made using hair gel. And so the idea for this series really began from a memory, actually. And so when I was in junior high school, me and my classmates used a hair gel called stijl. It was very, very popular in the 90s. And I remember vividly seeing one day a girl at school, and she had used a lot of hair gel. And I remember seeing her forehead and seeing this line of brown hair gel across the top of her forehead where her hairline started. And that memory always fascinated me. And so I kept thinking about this memory and thinking about using this hair gel as a material. And I began to think about hair gel as a metaphor for skin. And so the works that you will see, including this one here, are really reminiscent of a type of skin, because I really began to see hair gel as this second skin when thinking back to that memory of this layer of gel on my classmate's forehead. And so in thinking about these skins, I began to create skins using this hair gel. And hair gel is a really interesting material to use and to work with because it has a natural process that where it goes through, when you think about it, gel in its original form is very gooey and jelly-like. And once it's taken out of the container or the jar, it then goes through a process of absorption once you apply it to your hair. And it begins to dry out. And then it dries out so much so that it begins to crack. And it begins to crack so much and dry out so much that it becomes so thin, it eventually flakes off of the surface and becomes nothing. And so I really thought about this process this natural process of gel, and kind of becoming really interested in the similar process of skin, and how skin is, on the one hand, it's the most exterior part of our bodies. It protects the internal organs, but at the same time, skin is it's a holder and it's a recorder of marks, of scars, of history. And so I was interested in combining these ideas with this process, this natural process that occurs with hair gel. And so if you look at all of the lines that you see here, this one in particular, this one here, and all of these lines like this one here, those were all made by just the natural process of the gel absorbing. So, so my process is taking the gel with my hand, spreading it out on the surface, either wood panel or paper, and creating the image that I want, applying it thicker in some areas, thinner in some areas, and just letting the gel absorb into the surface. And so none of these lines were made by me carving those lines in there. It was the natural process of the gel. And so I really like that this process began to kind of mimic how skin functions as a recorder of marking of history, because sometimes when I make these works, insects are attracted to the gel and they will come and get stuck in the gel. Sometimes when I'm working on this work, if I'm working outside, it'll rain and the raindrops will then get stuck in the gel and they will be recorded into the gel. So I really like this kind of circular process of layering that was happening with the meaning in this work. And so thinking about this gel as a skin, I thought about the skin as this conduit for the body. And so I thought about space, because our bodies exist in space, in many different kinds of environments, in many different kinds of spaces. And so I sought to create spaces that these skins could inhabit. So some of the imagery in some of this series looks like a cosmic space. Some of it looks like an earthly space, meaning it looks like the ground or land or dirt. And then some of the work is reminiscent of just the state of being. And I feel that we exist in all three of these spaces all at the same time. And so I thought it very fitting to have some of the imagery look like some of these images. So I'll go on to the next one. So this one that you're looking at now is reminiscent of the earthly type of space. But again, you see the skin. And it's even interesting because the skin not only resembles scarring or burning of maybe human skin, but it also looks like animal hide and certain kinds of animal skins. And so again, it has this connection to the ground and to earth. The next one. And so this one is more reminiscent of a cosmic space. And this one is one where I mentioned before that this one I was making outside and it rained. And so all of these little circles were drops of rain that were recorded into the work. And then this next one, this one is more for me about just the state of being, this womb-like image where it's light in the center and it gets dark progressively around the edges. But as you can see, if you look very close here in the center, the gel has started to crack and to actually flake off of the surface of the paper all along this edge here. And so I really appreciate that about the work, that it reveals the kind of precarious and temporary nature of the material in the work itself. And I believe there's one more. Yeah, there's one more here. Okay, and so I'll go ahead and move on to the next body of work. Okay, so this is a piece called Decline. It was made in 2015. And this piece and this series is a series of graphs. And the material that you're looking at here are elastic hair bands. Now these bands are worn by a lot of youth. A lot of girls wear these when they're very young. And I believe that every family probably has like a different name for this item, but it's an elastic hairband that has colorful balls at the two ends of the band. And if you look at this, I'll show you this next image, a detail of it. You can see that I've cut off the colorful balls and I've tied the bands into knots, creating these long strings. So in this series, I was interested in how sometimes people are statistics and are represented by statistics and statistical information. And I was interested in sort of the aesthetics of graphs, the formal qualities of these lines. And I wanted to create work that was using this aesthetic of this graph and these lines, but existed solely via attention. So if you look at the y-axis here and the x-axis here of this graph, it was made by me attaching one end of the string or of the elastic band to the rod, and then stretching this band as far as it could go to the other end here. And likewise here for the vertical axis, here at the top to the bottom. And so oftentimes when installing this work, the band would actually break and I would have to retie it again until it reached a state of some kind of equilibrium in the tension. But I became interested in this parallel between these statistics, statistical information used to represent people, and the work existing within tension and because of tension. And then this one, next one. the detail again. And so here's one that's called Increase. It was made around the same time. So again, just using sort of iconic graph images, decline, increase. But what you'll notice is that these bands, because the balls are not there anymore, the knots begin to resemble barbed wire or birds on a telephone pole line. And so, so I really became interested in all of the multiple associations that grew out of this work. This one is called Bell Curve, and it was inspired by my thoughts about education, my own personal education, and also thinking just about how I honestly was thinking about how I was never really good at math in school. And so I just began to think about education and my personal education in general. And I was looking up sort of statistics about education. And this image right here is based on a book called The Bell Curve, written by a psychiatrist and a political scientist. A social scientist, social scientist. And in this book, it talked about it was written in the 90s, in 94, I believe, and it talked about a group of intelligent people in the country and how one's intelligence basically informs every aspect, every other aspect of how they move through society and life. But the book was very controversial when it was written, because it made a lot of predictions about the future of society based on these groupings of people and their intelligence. And so, so I began to think about just this image of this curve, and how I remember, like when I was in school, you were always graded on a curve, and so I wanted to make this work again about this icon, about education, this symbol that sort of represents educational value, and have it be existing because of tension with these elastic bands that are of the body, are of hair, are used to hold back and to tie hair together, but are definitely of the body. And I believe, yeah, there's another one here. And this one, I've decided to incorporate the colorful balls that are at the ends of the elastic bands. And so this is actually, instead of a line graph, this is a scatter plot graph. But again, I wasn't so interested in the actual statistical information that came with these graphs that I was sourcing, but I was just interested in the aesthetics of these graphs, and having the aesthetics of this graph be balanced by these moments of tension in the work. So this one is one it's a little different than the rest of the work in the series, as some of the other ones I've created are. But this one is called Of an Obtuse Angle. And so it was trying to construct a work where all of the angles from here to here to here are all obtuse. But again, you see the tension. Again, you can see the associations of barbed wire, especially with the shadows that you see here at the bottom of the works on the side. And I'll just go to one more of the detail. Okay, and I'll go to the next body of work. And as you can see, this my practice is largely material based. Okay, so this is the next body of work. So this series is a series. Oh, geez, when did I start this series? I believe I started this series in 2013, I want to say. But it's ongoing. I'm still making more of this work. So this is a series where I made molds of ceramic molds of combs, different kinds of combs. And in this series, you'll see two different kinds of combs in particular. So I made ceramic molds of these combs, and I decided to alter them. So this is a comb that's made with earthenware slip, ceramic earthenware slip, and it's then glazed in a black glaze. And as you can see here, I've altered the teeth of the comb, where I've made these have sharp points here and here at the top. And I've also removed some of the teeth that were here and here. And so as you can see, I'm taking an object, the comb, that is used as a beauty tool, a grooming tool, an everyday tool that we use, to comb our hair, to style our hair. And I'm taking it, altering it, and giving it a different association. And so in this series, you'll see combs that are reminiscent of weapons, combs that are reminiscent of keys, combs that are reminiscent of ancient relics, combs that are reminiscent of measuring tools, and combs that are reminiscent of just tools in general. And so I'm really interested in that idea of this kind of repetitive redundancy, where the comb is a tool, but then I'm altering it to make it look even more like a tool. I'm really interested in that kind of idea, because I think it reveals things about these objects that we may take for granted. So I'll go on to some of the next ones. This one is a different shaped comb. The first one was a pick. This one is called a styler tool comb. it has wider teeth here on this left side, and it has thinner teeth here on this right side, and then a set of teeth here at the bottom. But this one I've made to look like some kind of a tool where it's almost like a hammer at the top. And I didn't mention, but some of these combs, I alter them to make them non-functional as well. And so I've completely removed all of the teeth here so that they couldn't possibly be used as a comb. In this one, I thought it would be a little funny to create a comb that looked like it had hair that was being parted down the middle. So there's a little humor here in this one. And interestingly enough, I started making this series when I got dreadlocks. And so when I got dreadlocks, I didn't use a comb anymore to comb out my hair every day. This one is definitely made to be a weapon, and the prior combs were used with black glaze, and this one is a glaze that is made to look like steel. But as you can see, I'm definitely interested in metaphor. The hair gel as skin, the combs as weapons, the combs as measuring tools, the combs as tools, the elastic hair bands as tension. And so this is an installation view of the combs with their stands. It's kind of hard to tell, but they're in a vitrine case. And so I'll go on to the next body of work. I believe that's the last. Okay, yeah. So this body of work is a group of drawings that I created about 2 years ago, and these drawings were made with graphite as well as compressed charcoal, and I believe regular charcoal in some of them. And so in these drawings, I wanted to create these portraits of young men where the focus would be on the part in their hair. Because the part for me has, and I think culturally as well, the part is a point of emphasis, and it's a point of style. And so I wanted to kind of abstract these portraits and really just focus on the parts, and at the same time create these kind of fields of graphite space around the parts. So these are actual, the source material for these drawings was just heads, the portraits of young Black men. And they all had a haircut with a part in the haircut. And so on this one, for example, this is where the face of the young man would be, and his ear would be here. The same for this one. This is where the face would be, and this is where his face would be here. And it's really cropped in, but his face, the outline of his face would begin here. And so I was really just interested in these parts, as I've said, and I kind of thought back to something that we talked about in a class I was in years ago, where we were talking about the work of Dan Flavin. And he would often tilt his fluorescent tubes to a 45-degree angle. And there was something about that angle that really intrigued him. And I think in a similar way, I've always been interested in these parts in hair, because they're just very present. But I think, I began to see them as points, almost points of light. So I believe I have some close-up ones. And so in making these drawings, I've really worked the surface of the paper to create a kind of velvety quality to the surface. Here's one here. And this part, it's not really at an angle, but it's a curved line. Yeah, and so yeah, and so in this work, there's just this four that I've created, and I will create more of in this series, but just the combination of slight abstracting of the face and of the head, and just focusing in on the part was really, really important to me. So let me check the time. Okay. And so those are the four series that I wanted to share. And I do have, I believe, an image of some current work that I am making. I think there's, should be here. Yeah. So this is sort of a sketch, I'll say, of some work that I am working on currently. And if you look closely, you'll see that it says Oreo in the center of each one of these circles. These are made with synthetic braiding hair. And I've made a mold of an Oreo cookie and cast it in the synthetic braiding hair, white hair and black hair. And this is a series I'm working on called Black Holes, where I'm thinking about a couple different things, but I'm thinking about the parallel between race and black holes. When I looked at the definition of a black hole, it's essentially a mass that has so much density that light cannot escape it. Nothing can escape it. And I think that so it's all encompassing of everything, but it's interesting that we know very, very little about it. And I think that there are parallels to that and to race. And so I decided to create these small Oreo cookie molds because if you call someone an Oreo, it means that, you know, they're black on the outside and white on the inside. And I just was thinking about how interesting it is that we can distill race down to a cookie, to a simple object that is then consumed. And it's really interesting because I think that, you know, race is all encompassing of everything, yet we know very little about how it functions, how it affects us. We know some, but not very, very much, I think. And so these are sort of the beginnings of you know, my thoughts on trying to combine these Oreo cookies, black holes, race together. And some of them will definitely be larger, but this is sort of like the kind of first workings of it that I thought I would share. And as you can see, again, I'm very much interested in metaphor, very much interested in materials and using materials that are of the body, recontextualizing them and then bringing them back around again to the body. Okay, so I think I will, trying to look at the time here. I will stop my screen share. And that's it. I don't know where I am on time, Michael Ray.
I think you're fine.
Oh, okay.
Are you ending here? We could start the Q&A.
Yes, I am ending there.
Good. It was a lot of work that I had not seen.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm intrigued. Nevertheless, I would say the work has come a long way, and you're still asking some really amazing questions, and I really appreciate how you you keep pushing beyond where you started. You know, when I first met you, saw your images. They were drawings, I believe, and they were very quiet. Still, this kind of quietness about them, but there was traditional materials, and I think that's a radical shift. Has been the use of non-traditional materials, and that is the area I'd like to start our discussion. Can you talk more about your use of non-traditional materials and how that started, and of course, you know, how that continues to intrigue you and be a means for producing work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. I started using non-traditional materials, I believe, because I was wanting to make work about hair and hair as a subject matter. And so at the time, using materials seemed to be a more direct way to arrive at what I was interested in, and so I started with the hair grease, and that was really my first instance of using non-traditional materials, because I just felt like it allowed me to get closer to what I wanted to say in the work. And I think because I was starting to think about abstraction more, and what it means to abstract something, abstract from something, or something to be abstracted, the non-traditional materials seemed to kind of work better with that idea, and working in an abstract way. And so, really, I thought a lot about David Hammond's work, actually, because David Hammond's in the 70s made a series of body prints where he applied pigment to his body and then pressed his body onto paper. And he made some really great work doing that. And I was interested at the time in making drawings that were a representative of different gestures that had to do with doing your hair. So the gesture of like parting your hair down the middle, that sort of gesture, I was interested in making drawings that were reflective of that. And so I started to use grease and applying grease on paper, hair grease, and running my fingers through grease. And I started there. And the non-traditional materials just allowed for a more bodily kind of response in the work, and instead of mainly an optical one. And I was interested. I've heard some artists say that that abstraction is sort of this like in between space. And I really wanted to make work that was sitting in this in between space, because work that was representative of the body, but then apart from the body, but then still referencing the body. So sitting in this very kind of in between space, I was really interested in that. And so when I was trying to make those drawings about hair gestures, that's how I kind of arrived at that. And as I've come, many years now, working with traditional materials, and working with non-traditional materials, they just have different qualities about them that that are suited to the idea of the work.
It's working with different types of materials. Often the materials dictate the possibility of what you can do with them.
Mm-hmm.
Can we shift to I want to go away from the hair grease drawings or works, I should say, and towards the the comb pieces, because we have a question about the scale of the comb pieces. And I know they're more or less relative in size to an actual comb itself. Yeah. Have you thought of increasing the size of those?
Oh yeah, for sure. I have. I think it was Sanford Biggers. He made a sculpture of a life-size comb that I think is like smashed on the ground. And when I saw that, I was really inspired to make sculptural size combs where they're definitely like life size. So I've for sure have thought about it. I think what the clay, the ceramic material kind of allowed me to do was to just think about kind of duplicating the fragility of combs, and how sometimes when I would use a comb in my hair, like the teeth would break. And I think at the time when I was making these combs, I was wanting to kind of mimic a material that's strong and fragile at the same time. But yeah, definitely, I've thought about it and would like to increase the size for sure.
So, are you like out gathering different types of materials that you think you might use? What comes first? Is it the drawing or the idea of that comes first, and then the material choice is second? How does that work for you?
For me, the idea comes first, and then the material choice is second. But in my studio, like I'll have the idea and then I'll get the material. But sometimes you just have a surplus of material lying around, like over the years, and sometimes just like looking at it all the time will spurn ideas, and kind of moments of play, like in the studio, will happen.
You
But
said, you said in your discussion that their metaphor is the guiding source in a way. You're interested in using materials that reference the body but not represent the body. I don't want to put words in your mouth. In a way, they represent the body, or the absence of the body, and they're referential to the body. For example, the Oreo pieces that reference hair, you know. But the fact that you're referencing black and white takes on, I think, a different interpretation, one that begins to get political within the sociological context. And even the comb pieces do something similar, but in a subtle way. You know, you're talking about combs that are used to cultivate beauty relative to a black body. And I say that specifically because, you know, I have a couple of those pics and have had a number of them back in the 70s. Yeah, so are you done with that series, the pics?
No, no, not at all, not at all. But yeah, my kind of way of working in the studio is I will kind of go from series to series, come back to certain series, and work like that. But no, I'm not done with it, for sure. I've always seen it as like an ongoing series.
There's the hair gel drawings. I hope you're not finished with those. I think that there's so much possibility still there yet to explore. I know that a couple were on paper. Have they made their way to canvas, any of them?
Yeah, some small ones I've done. I have done on canvas, and they work similarly, actually. They work similarly, but I think the ones I've done on canvas were on unstretched canvas.
Yeah.
And so they, they work kind of similarly. So I do try all types of like surfaces.
I would imagine that working on a stretched canvas, depending on how tight the canvas is stretched, there would be the gel material would react to that tension in the canvas, which might increase or at least help nurture new ideas. But I really, that's one of my favorite groups of work that you've done, and I still think there's a ton more work to be done with that, even towards possibility of moving towards representational work.
Oh yeah.
So why is abstraction so important to you in terms of your go-to mode of expression?
Yeah, I think I just it's kind of funny. How should I really answer that? It's there's something about creating work that deals in abstraction that that feels it's hard to say. It's hard to say because I think we all start out, making representational work. If we're we either doodle, like drawing faces or something like that when we're young, and it's kind of it's what's familiar to us, and it's a language that we understand. Representation. We can point to this and we can say, oh, this is an iPhone, this is a lamp, this is a tree, this is a family, this is a person. And I think the what abstraction does for me is it's just allowed me to it's allowed me to arrive at the questions that I have in a it feels like a more immediate way in the way that I'm working. But I think sometimes I have like an itch to work in a representational kind of mode, and I wonder, will I ever do that? We'll see. We'll definitely see. I think those drawings that I showed at the end are, for me, those feel representational, even though like maybe some people do see them as more abstract, in which they are. But it really just comes down to the idea, and if I feel like representation suits the idea that I have, then yeah.
Well, we have another question. Do you feel that engaging in abstraction, as you say, as in between spaces, has the potential to be a political position in contemporary context?
Yeah, I think it always has. There are so many artists who sought to engage in abstraction because they were trying to not painting the body, they were attempting to mimic the erasure of the body that they see in society, for some artists. And I would say, for me, it's just a language that I think you kind of alluded to before. It's for me, it's allows me to be very subtle, and to kind of have multiple associations. And I don't know if I don't know if, let's see, of the contemporary time. But yeah, I definitely think abstraction is definitely, it can be suited to politics. It's you know, it's rooted in that in that mode. I mean, that's a whole conversation right there.
So let's move on. There is another question.
Okay.
The presentation of the combs is one vitrine, and one vitrine makes the reading of them particularly ethnographical, or at least carries that meaning. Was that intentional? And if so, why?
Yeah, it was, because I think I said before, I wanted some of the combs to represent relics of like a former time. So ceramics, clay for me is a material that represents like the foundation of many societies. When you go back and you look at like ancient civilizations, you will always find pottery. You will always find some kind of clay object or item. And I wanted to make combs that that had that that feel, that sort of ethnographic museum feel, as you say, because in many cultures, if you go back and look, combs are often the earliest and the oldest thing that are represented of a civilization and of culture. And so I wanted some of the combs that I've made, that I've altered to have that look in and of themselves in the form, but also in the vitrine.
How important is doing research on how important is doing research to your art practice?
Oh, for me, it's important, and I think what the way it functions is, it can function differently for like many different artists, but for me, doing research, it kind of grounds, it grounds your ideas, and it grounds the materials for me that I work with. It when I'll do research about combs, or about like the Oreos, the black holes I was talking about during research about black holes, dark matter, dark energy, it it kind of gives you uh, it just helps you to know like the parameters of what you're really working with and what you're kind of dealing with, especially when you're an artist who's kind of working the same way as I am, where some of the materials are, you know, exist in the world, and are of the world, and have a history, and have a relationship to people. And so so research is important because it just allows you to have an awareness of what you're working with. I would always really like to do more research. I think I could really do a lot more, but and I think it's also, it can be inspirational as well. Stuff I've read has been inspirational as I'm reading it, for sure.
What would you say your biggest inspirations is?
My biggest inspirations would be my environment and my childhood, probably. Yeah. Yeah. I often think back to like old memories, and I will pull from those memories. So for example, with the elastic hair bands, those graph works, I thought about what it was like to wear those in my hair and stretching those. And so those, that the tension was very important for me, like in that work. So, so that's how my childhood is, like, I think a major source. Yeah.
That's a really good piece as well. But despite, I would imagine that one being, there's a lot of, I see a lot of pain in at least three of the bodies of work, or groups of work.
Mm-hmm.
In the first one, the crackling, the pulling apart, separating of a whole after you've put it into place, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then in the second piece, there's the emphasis on the tension and maintaining that tension.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds me, if I could think of an image that comes to mind, it's Samson, the image or the concept of Samson pulling or holding two pillars in place, So
Oh, yes. Yeah.
kind of tension. And that's in and of itself pretty painful, I think. But then there is a different representation, I think, that exists in the combs, which there's symbolism, I think, that's there, but the combs become tools,
Mm-hmm.
and the tools are keys, as you mentioned. What else did you mention?
Weapons,
Keys, weapons. I wrote that.
Measurement tools.
Right. But
Yeah.
but the comb is also about a tool that prepares oneself to look a certain way, as we know, presentable.
Mm-hmm.
They seem to be, that piece seems to be most political than any of the others, but a different type of pain, for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree. And and all of this work that I've made, it really, starts from a personal kind of place, and then it ends up encompassing broader conversations. But so yeah, so the combs, it definitely, there's a bit more breadth there. They're definitely political, by making them non-functional. I think is political. And for me personally, at one point, because they're, like you said, they're tools used for beauty, and there are definitely beauty standards that exist. There are our own personal standards, beauty standards that we try to ascribe to. And the comb is a tool that is used in achieving, a certain kind of beauty. And if you look at different kinds of combs, depending on the teeth, they will fit different kinds of hair.
Mm-hmm.
And so making some of these combs non-functional, making some of them have nothing to do with hair, like the one that's kind of parted like that, is definitely political. Making some of them weapons, like small shanks, is for sure.
The first thing that came to mind is you used to describe it, said you created a prison shank.
Yeah, yeah. But some of these combs that I've worked with, I'm just kind of also working within the parameters of the form of the comb itself. but just sort of bringing out all of these possibilities that exist within that form, I think is interesting as well.
I agree. And you haven't gotten to the point with the Combs, I think, where you've exhausted its possibility in terms of becoming or suggesting or implying something else. In other words, it's not just material. You're still playing with the concept of the comb or the frame of reference of the comb.
Exactly.
And I find that really intriguing too, that you could get that much out of it. And, you know, then the piece about the last groups of works, which are, those are drawings, right? Or photographs?
The drawings, yes. Yeah, they're drawings.
And what's that done with in terms of material?
Graphite and charcoal.
Yeah, okay. I have another question, and it's best I get more questions in than I take up the time talking. Someone wants to know about the Austin art scene.
Oh, interesting. It's definitely changed, I would say, but I would say it's mostly gallery based, and you have, I would say there is the gallery scene. There are a couple of museums here, and then there is the East Austin Studio Tour, which I think is representative of just the vast community of artists that exist in Austin. And the East Austin Studio Tour is, it's an event where every artist in the city can open up their studio and invite the public in. And it happens in the fall of every year, in November, actually. And it's still going to go on virtually this year. But usually you can walk from street to street and just visit studio after home studio after home studio and see work. So I think that that's something that's sort of like this tradition of art walks that have started in many cities. That's something that Austin is, that's going on here. And then I would say that the art scene here is definitely growing. It's definitely developing. It's constantly in flux. You know, some galleries have come and gone since I've been here in 2009, I would say. But what I really appreciate about the art scene here is the camaraderie between artists here amongst artists.
You know, a lot of former graduates have stayed in the area and have started artist spaces and artist-run spaces. Of course, Austin is growing and at an alarming rate in the minds of most folks. So there's a large base of potential patronage that has moved in, and it brings with a different relationship to contemporary art production.
Yeah.
You know? So I also think that, you know, Austin has been associated with being a music city for so long, not the video arts, but the audio arts, and that's been a challenge. But I often wonder, since my leaving, how that has changed as well.
Yeah, I think the music scene is definitely sort of has good relationship with the city, and there's just a lot of things like South by Southwest, Austin City Limits that people know about, and there are things happening in Austin that are on similar levels in the visual arts. The contemporary Austin now has had an art prize, a major art prize for the past couple of years. And so that's one thing I think that's sort of trying to get people to really see the value of visual arts here in Austin. I think people are trying to partner with arts organizations, trying to do more partnerships to sort of get more people involved, get more eyes on the visual arts that's happening here.
So I have another question. Do you think about your work's conversation with art history, particularly process art, quotation, the hair gel paintings, and reductive abstraction from the 1970s, like minimalism and post-minimalism?
Oh, yeah, definitely, for sure. We can't make art in a vacuum. There's always a group of artists that have come before us that have, there's nothing new under the sun, so to speak. And so I feel like I am definitely in a lineage. A lot of my work borrows from aspects of the formal qualities of minimalism. My work is very minimal in that sense of aesthetics, where I've reduced a lot. There's a lot of repetition happening in my work, and so I do borrow from those aesthetics, and in terms of, I forget what was the first part. There was another.
I think it was reductive minimalism. One second.
Okay.
Whoa, I think I got new questions here. The first was process art, reductive abstraction, and from the 1970s, like minimalism and post-minimalism.
Oh, okay. Yeah, for sure. I think there's definitely, I can definitely speak to borrowing aesthetics from the minimalist movement, for sure. Many of those artists, Judd, of course, and so many. Walter Ciel. There's something that I really appreciate just about the aesthetics of kind of getting to like a purity in the sense of material, to repetition, to thinking about installation, how objects work in space, and thinking about how to create with space. I definitely kind of borrow from that aesthetic, and there's other artists who are like making art now. I would say an artist like Leslie Hewitt. She is someone who I think borrows from minimalist aesthetic as well, and kind of makes these really great geometric forms that exist in space. Borrow as well, and I do too, for sure.
Your hair, your painting, your work. Well, first of all, are you still painting?
No. It has been a long time since I've made a painting.
Yeah, it's interesting. You find your voice in many ways. The question that I have is about the subject of hair, which seems to be consistent in all of those pieces that you've shown. And I'm curious to find out, there's a number of artists who've done work with hair and about hair and representations of hair. but you seem to extend this kind of emphasis on hair consistently through these bodies of work that, and I would even say there was some of that in the first images that I saw of yours when you were coming into the graduate program at UT. Can you talk more about your subject or that subject of hair?
Sure. For me, hair is something that that I was attracted to, that I wanted to make work about or use to make work, because it's both a material and a subject matter at the same time. It speaks to many different things, like identity, politics, power, intimacy, loss. It speaks to process. And at the time when I started making work about this, it was really kind of a way for me to think about my identity, and then as it related to kind of larger ideas. These larger ideas about tension, about space, about the body, about spaces that we inhabit, about style, about beauty, and about functionality, like in the work. And I think it's just as a subject matter, it just lends itself toward so many multiple associations to metaphor, which as I've said, I gravitate to. And I think it's like you said, so many artists have. I think what is interesting, there's artists who will use hair as a subject matter maybe at one point in their career, but it's not sort of like the emphasis throughout their career. But someone like Sonia Clark, I think has really kind of been investigating hair and the history of it in this country. And so I kind of fall in line with some artists, I think, like Sonia Clark, who just and she even uses not only hair but yarn and other things that are hair-like, in her practice.
Well, what's interesting about Sonia's work in relationship to yours, Sonia seems to represent hair as it relates to a hairstyle, for example, or process associated with hair, braiding hair, and of course, emphasis on politics, especially the emphasis works with the flag, image of the flag. But yours stay in the realm of abstraction, in this space that even the piece on tension. Yours is about the pulling of hair, and I talk about pain. We've talked about pain associated with hair and concepts of beauty and maintaining those things. And you're making work that is, about using a bell curve and it's about tension. And you talked about these things breaking, and of course, you tying them back up. It's a different take on how you're dealing with concepts of hair, and the work conceptually is in a different space, I think. But nevertheless, both of those types of works can share the same space. And we're pushing to our limit here, and I'm thankful that our audience has been patient with me, of course, not with you, because you're always the patient one, I should say. Christina, I just want to tell you thank you. First of all, thank you for your creative voice, and thank you for your willingness to share your ideas and your work with us. Thank you for your creative voice and your willingness to continue to investigate and ask questions and create, I think, wonderful art. We don't say that enough to each other as artists, and I just want to take that opportunity to say that because I think you provide wonderful ideas that can inspire more creativity. And thank you for being a part of our community today.
Yeah, it's an honor. It's really an honor to talk with you always, Michael Ray, and to be a part of your community here at U of H. And I just want to say thank you to the department again, and to everyone who decided to check into this talk. And I really appreciate your presence here and your questions.
Okay, if we don't have any more questions, we're going to sign off. Christina, thank you again.
Thank you.